In this chapter, we're going to talk about techniques and passes. Techniques and passes are located at the bottom of the shader and offer some pretty useful functionality. Let's scroll down here to the bottom of our shader, past the vertex shader and the fragment program that we talked about in the last chapter, right down here to techniques. We'll start out by talking about those. Techniques are variations on your shader. For example, if I wanted my shader to be able to run on several different generations of graphics hardware, I could set up a technique specifically designed for each different graphics card. Or if I wanted my object to use a very nice, fancy, expensive shader when it was close to the camera, and then swap out for a fast, cheap one when it was far away, I could do that as well. So anytime you want to make different versions of your shader, techniques are a good way to do it. Let's go ahead and give it a try. I've got one technique here, and you'll notice that it's called regular. So if I go over here to Max and I pop up my material panel, you can see here in the technique area, my drop-down list just has one technique in it called regular. Let's close that. And you'll notice that inside my technique here, I have one pass. We're going to talk about passes in a minute, but what I want you to notice inside the pass is that we're calling our vertex shader function here, V, and also our pixel shader function here, F. And we're passing in light 1 position, the position of light 1, to our vertex shader. And we're passing in light 1 color, the color of light 1, to our pixel shader. What if I wanted to create a version of the shader that used a different light? Let's do it. First, I need to go up here to the top of the shader and find the spot where the light information comes in from Max, and that's right here, light info. So what I'm going to do, what I've got right here is the position of light 1 and the color of light 1. And what I'm going to do is just go ahead and grab this chunk of code and copy it, Control C, then come down here and paste. And with this chunk, instead of light 1, I want it to be light 2. So I'm going to go ahead and change this to light 2 position. And I'm going to give light 2 ref ID of 1. And for the color, I'm going to say light 2 color. And I'm going to say light ref 1. Now what light ref and ref ID are, this is a Max specific syntax. And what it does is it tells Max that I want to get this color from this light. If this light ref number matches this ref ID, then Max knows that I want the color from this light. Anyway, so now I've got a second light source here in my shader. Okay, so now we'll save the shader and come over here to Max, and I'll pull up the material panel again. And you'll notice that now I have two light positions. Now one thing that I want to do is differentiate these two. So instead of having two light position slots, I want to have light 1 position and light 2 position, just so it's easy to know which is which. So if I save my shader here, notice that the panel updates, and now I have light 1 position and light 2 position. Now this is saying default light because I only have one Omni light in my scene right now. So what I need to do next is go ahead and come over here and add a new Omni light to the scene. And it's not going to do anything because my shader is set up to only use one Omni light. So when I put it in here, it's not going to do anything. Next thing that I need to do is assign the Omni light right here in the menu. And you'll notice now that I have two Omni lights in my scene, I can pick which one I want. So for this slot, I'm going to pick Omni 2 and close my material panel. And I'll go ahead and go back into expert mode here. All right, so nothing's happening yet, and that's because I need to add another technique to my shader. So I'll scroll down here to the techniques again. And just to keep it clear, I'm going to rename this technique. And I'm going to call it light 1. Now all I have to do is grab this bit of code here for the technique and copy it. I'm going to paste it right down here. And instead of light 1, this one's going to be called light 2. So instead of passing in light 1 position, I'm going to change that to light 2 position. And for the pixel shader, instead of passing in light 1 color, I'm going to pass in light 2 color. All right, so let's save it. And we'll go back over here to Max. I'll bring up the material panel again. Now notice that my technique is called light 1. And if I drop this down, I have two techniques, light 1 and light 2. And if I pick light 2, see the teapot switches. So now it's using light 2's position. And also, if I wanted to, I could come over here to the properties of light 2 and open up the color panel. And let's make light 2 blue. Well, the color doesn't seem to be working right now, but anyway, you get the idea. Alright, I figured out why the light color wasn't working, and I just want to explain that really quick before we go on. Let's scroll back up here to where I'm bringing in the light information. And what I wanted to explain was, I've got light 1 color right here, and light 2 color right here. And those are the key words or terms that I'm using in my techniques when I pass them into the pixel shader. So the information goes from here into my pixel shader right here. So it takes on, so when it comes in, it's now named light color. It's not called light 1 color or light 2 color anymore. I'm giving it a new name when I bring it into the function, the vertex shader. So it's light color. Now, what happened here is I made a mistake in my pixel shader, and I called it light 1 color, or I'm using light 1 color down here at the bottom. And what that means is, instead of using light color, which is getting passed into it from my techniques, what the computer is doing is, because I said light 1 color here, it's actually getting that value straight from light 1 color here at the top. So both of my lights in my Max scene are using the color from light 1. And I'll just demonstrate that really quick here. If I turn this to red, so you can see my teapot's red now. And if I switch to my other technique, you can see that that light's using the red color as well. So both lights are using light 1 color, which is not what I want. So what I need to do is go here to my pixel shader, and instead of light 1 color, I'm just going to say light color. So what that's going to do is it's going to use light color that's getting passed in from the techniques. So let's go ahead and save that. Come back over here to Max. And now I've got light 1, and that one's red. And if I switch to light 2, and that one's blue. So if I go here to the second light, that one's the blue one. And this one's the red one. Anyway, so the lesson to take home is, if you're passing parameters in to your shaders from your techniques, be sure that you use the name of the parameter that you're receiving here instead of a hard-coded value from your values at the top of your shader. So we have our light 1 technique and our light 2 technique, and I can choose which light I want to use just by switching the techniques in and out. All right, let's come back over here to the shader. And just a couple more things about techniques. If I wanted to, I could write a completely different pixel shader or a completely different vertex shader and name it something else. You know, this one's called V and this one's called F. But say I wanted to write a different pixel shader, I could copy this one and paste it, and I could call this one F2, right? And then down here in my second technique, instead of calling F, I could just call F2 and use a completely different pixel shader for this one. If I wanted to, I could even put all the shaders from my whole project right here in one effect file. I could make a metal pixel shader, a glass, skin, plastic, stone, and just make a technique for each of them. Then the artist using the shader would just need to choose which material type he wanted from the technique dropdown. Anyway, so there's lots of cool ways to use techniques when you're making your shaders. Now let's talk about passes. Each technique contains at least one pass. A pass is like one complete trip down the graphics pipeline. Think about passes this way. If you have a big pile of stuff to carry from one spot to another, you might want to try just carrying half of the stuff on your first trip and then carrying the other half on your second trip. It works the same with shaders. If you want to make an effect that's a bit too complex for the graphics card to handle all in one go, you break the shader into multiple passes. For each pass, the graphics card goes all the way through the pipeline, dumps its results to the frame buffer, and then comes back for more. On the next pass, you can tell the shader how you want to blend the results of the current pass with the results of the previous pass. Kind of like blending layers in Photoshop. Okay, so before we get into making multiple passes, let's take a look right here. We're going to be talking about the information right here. See where it says pass 1? We're going to be talking about these items here. First thing we have is the vertex shader. So here on the first line, we're saying our vertex shader is this. And what we're saying is compile, and that means convert our vertex shader from HLSL into assembly instructions. And we're going to compile using this profile. Now, in this case, we're saying vertex shader 1.1. And that number is the minimum hardware spec that will run our shader. VS11 will run on any graphics card that supports DirectX 8. You can also use VS20 or VS30, which require DirectX 9 support. If you want to know more about the differences between the different profiles, I've included a link to Microsoft's documentation right out here. So you can go to Microsoft's MSDN website and check out the differences between the different vertex shader profiles. So after we tell it what profile we want it to use, we tell the computer which vertex shader function we want it to use. In this case, we're telling it we want to use V because that's the name of our vertex shader. And then, of course, we pass in the required parameters to the function. Okay, now notice down here at the bottom of the pass that we also have pixel shader, and it works the same way. We tell it to compile the pixel shader using the pixel shader 2.20 profile, and we could also use 1.1 or we could use 3.0. And I'm using 2.0 because it has a lot more capabilities than 1.1. Pixel shader 1.1 is really, really limited. So most of the shaders that I write, I use pixel shader 2.0 profile. And once again, I've copied the URL of the MSDN webpage where you can find out more about the pixel shader profiles right there. And then just like the vertex shader, we're telling it which pixel shader to use. And in this case, we're using the one that we've named F. And we're passing in light 1 color as the parameter that that pixel shader requires. All right, now let's talk about the stuff here in the middle. First of all, what these items are called, they're called render states. And they're kind of like the settings in the renderer in Max. If we come over here and in Max we pick rendering render, there's all kinds of settings in here we can set that influence what the renderer does. And that's what these items are here in our shader as well. they each have, they each set one of the items that the renderer does. So for example, here's z_enable equals true. And what that does is it allows the computer to use the Z buffer to sort the objects. So our object currently being rendered will be able to use the Z buffer to sort. When objects render, in addition to rendering colored pixels, they also render pixels that represent depth or how far away from the camera they are. When the computer goes to render the next object, it knows to place the object in front or behind of the previous object by comparing each object's depth in the Z buffer. So if you put false here, you're not allowing the computer to sort based on the Z buffer. Okay, the next item we have is Z_write_enable. And what that does is it allows the computer on this pass of the shader to write its depth into the Z buffer. So if you say Z_write_enable equals false, that will not allow the computer to write into the Z buffer, so other objects may not sort correctly with the object that you're currently rendering. Next item in the list is called cull mode, and that's just like the backface culling setting in Max. So when we say cull mode equals CW, CW stands for clockwise, and what that's going to do is cull out all of the triangles that have a clockwise winding, or triangles that are facing away from the camera. It's going to draw triangles that are facing toward the camera and not draw triangles that are facing away. If we said cull mode equals CCW, now if we take a look over here at our teapot, what that's going to do is it's going to only draw the back-facing triangles. So we got an inside-out teapot now. And we can also do none, and that's like disabling backface culling, so it'll draw both back faces and front faces. Set this back to CW. And finally, we have alpha blend enable. And what that does is it allows the computer to use the alpha value of the pixel that was computed in the pixel shader to blend with whatever's behind it. And we have that set to false. Now, if you want to use transparency, what you would do is you would take the alpha channel of your diffuse texture, so color texture here, and you would say something like C.A for the alpha channel equals color texture.A. So you're passing the alpha channel of your color texture out as the result. And now the alpha value of the pixel that your pixel shader computes will be the same as the alpha channel of your texture. And so then you could say alpha blend enable equals true. And then come over here and look at the teapot. And now you can see that we've got transparency, because in the alpha channel of that cobblestones, I've got kind of a lighter color here where we've got the grout, and then a darker color in the alpha channel where we've got the actual cobblestones. So let's go ahead and undo that. And we'll save it and update it over here. Okay, now what we've got here is a shader that has two techniques, one that uses light 2 and one that uses light 1. Let's just go ahead and take a look at that. So we can switch to light 2, that one's blue, and light 1, that one's red. But what if we want to use both lights? Well, that's where passes come in. So let's go ahead and set up another technique that has two passes in it that'll allow us to do both lights. We'll just go ahead and copy this technique right here. I'm just going to paste it down here, and we're going to call this technique two lights. All right. So right now I've only got one pass here, and I need to go ahead and copy this pass. I'm going to paste it down here and call it pass 2. We need to make sure that we're passing in on our first pass light 1's position and color, and on our second pass light 2's position and color. Okay, so we'll go ahead and save this, and we'll jump over to Max and bring up our material panel again. And now we'll take a look at our techniques and notice that I have a new technique called two lights here that I just made in the shader. And when we pick it, what happens? So what we're seeing here is only illumination from light 2. We're not actually getting anything from light 1. Why is that? Well, the reason that's happening is because our second pass is just overwriting the first pass. It's as if you had two layers in Photoshop and they're both set to normal blend mode. You're only going to see the layer that's on top. That's what's happening. So what we need to do is go into our second pass here and set it up so that this pass will blend with the first pass. Let's go ahead and do that. The first thing that we're going to do is set Z-Write enable to false. And this is just an optimization. You don't have to do this, but you do this because in your first pass you've already written to the Z buffer and you don't need to do it again. So we're just going to set Z-Write enable to false, and we'll set alpha blend enable to true, because yes, we do want blending. And the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to add two more lines. One is source blend equals 1, and the other line is dest blend equals 1. And those two lines tell this pass that what it needs to do is blend with the previous pass. Okay, so we'll go ahead and save that and jump back over here to Max. Now you'll notice when I saved it, it automatically switched back to the first technique, and that's just a behavior that Max does. Whenever you save it, it always re-chooses technique 1. So now we'll jump down here, pick our two lights technique, and now we have kind of a purpley teapot because it's being lit by a blue light and also being lit by our red light. So that about wraps up our discussion of techniques and passes. And now we've gone over the entire effects framework. We talked about the UI elements here at the top, and we talked about the matrices. We talked about the input and output structs. We talked about the vertex and pixel shaders, and we talked about the techniques and passes. So in the next chapter, we're going to take all this knowledge of this overview that we've had of the effects format, and we're going to apply it. We're going to start with a really basic shader and just start adding some functionality to it, so you can see what the process is like of writing shaders.